Hello, hello. Welcome to this week's podcast. This is episode 232 of the Focused Mindset Podcast. Let me tell you guys, you are in for such a treat. I just had an opportunity to edit a conversation that I had a while back with Marc Cordon. He is truly a great person to have a conversation with. And I know you're going to love listening in because we talk about all of these different ways to adjust our mindset, to have better self-talk. It's just really, really cool. Now, some of you guys might already know that I am having conversations with different people that have TEDx talks out there in the world. And I'm so encouraged by speaking to these people that I'm planning on starting a whole second podcast called The Red Circle Mindset. But you know what? It takes time. And I do not want to wait and have you miss out on this conversation a minute longer. I know that you're going to enjoy it as much as I am. And I have another conversation from another amazing TEDx speaker coming up next week or the week after. And I can't wait for you to hear it. Thank you for tuning in today. And without any further ado, let's get started. Hello, welcome to the podcast. I have a super duper cool guest today. I have Marc Cordon. Marc is somebody that I met through TEDx, which just shouldn't surprise anybody. But then come to find out, we have a ton of stuff in common, right? So welcome, Marc. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Cher, for having me on. And by the way, congratulations on your first year.
It's pretty cool. It's cool to look back. Oh, wow. I could actually see what I did since the TEDx went live. Like it was a very, very interesting
Yeah.
year. So it's really cool.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had an interesting year, right? Like you're a coach for TEDx
I
Ocala.
know.
Like you're doing this podcast. You just met your daughter's friend.
I know. I know. She better not listen to this. She'll be like, hey, and it is just friend. You know, I'm telling you right now, like the dating world is hilarious because you're like, you can't say the wrong title. Like you're either talking and then you're dating and then your boyfriend, girlfriend is like, I get confused. What stage are you in? You know, like, I don't know. I think they're dating.
Yes.
I think.
Well, growing up with Filipino parents, no
Uh-oh, are
matter
we
how
getting our
deep of a
connection up?
relationship I was in, they'd always just say, "Oh, this is Mark's friend. Your friend." It's like, come on, mom. We've been seeing each other for like 4 years. So, yeah, yeah,
I'm telling you, it's like, it's a process. Okay.
completely. It's a complete process.
We'll just say that.
So, yeah, yeah. I think that's why I do so many like TEDx and podcast stuff is because I'm still trying to make sense of East and West blending together.
We're
So
doing the
yeah,
best.
completely. Well, you know what's funny about all that stuff was like I was just friends for the people that I was dating, right? But then like my buddies would come
Yeah.
over and they'd just barely know the other person, and like my mom would be like, "Oh, so you're gonna get married and you love each other?" So it's
Like,
been
whoa,
insane.
whoa, whoa. This is the weird world that we live in. I've been interviewing people recently about is this mindset that
Yeah,
we have to get in when we do something huge in our life. For example, a TEDx,
yeah,
right? And other big things like when we
yeah,
gear up to write a book and these big things in our life where we
yeah,
know that we need to be in a certain mindset. And I think it's so interesting to unpack where people are at through that
yeah.
journey. So, how in the world did you? I know you've done more than one TEDx,
Hmm.
and then you've also been a coach, right?
Yeah.
So that's unbelievable. But how did you like get interested in this whole thing, like from the beginning?
Yeah, well, number one is I think I'm a glutton for
Meh.
pain. Number one, right? And by the way, I wouldn't have gone any other way but to go through that. When it comes to a TEDx, I always had said like it would be great to be on stage, but it was the point to where, um, s- so essentially, I've been doing like positive psychology stuff and training and coaching around that sort of thing, and I wrote this sort of XY axis on a
Mm-hmm.
napkin that looked at like what does it mean to experience joy as well as to be more productive in the world,
Mm.
right? And that turned into that little napkin. I started sharing with like coaching companies. I started sharing with positive psychology uh, professors. I went to the World Happiness Summit with that little napkin and I showed it to folks. There was this kind of rock star dude. His last name is Baswat
Oh,
Dinar, and he looks like Dave Grohl,
nice.
right? So I was sitting next to him. I was like, "Hey, you're," and he's like, "Yeah." And so I was like, "Can you?" I was like, "Can you look at this napkin for a second?" And so he looked at this model. And he was like, "Yeah, that's dope. I haven't seen anybody do that." And right when he said that, I was like, "It's on. I'm gonna go and like I want to go and share this on
Yes.
stage." And it really was something that, when you let an idea incubate enough, where do you want to go and tell that at a place that promotes ideas?
Mhm.
So luckily I had a little bit of knowledge at what a TEDx was about. What I didn't expect, though, was the number of rejections that I would
Wow.
get, right? Then you kind of iterate and iterate and iterate. And then all of a sudden, the last 5 times that I applied, I got 4 acceptance
Wow.
pieces. Right. And that's the very beginning of that. And what I think the first time I had gone through it, even the second time I had gone through it, it is straight up shadow work. like, like everything that could come up, any insecurities, any lack of mindset, came up. And I don't know about you, Cher, but like for both of those opportunities that I had, there was like a moment in which I was like, what in the F am I
Yes.
doing? Like, why am I doing this to myself? And or I'd rehearse so much that I'm like, I don't even know if this makes sense anymore. Cause like my body got neutral to
That's
it. It's,
weird, but
you
so
know,
true.
it is, and I had the opportunity to go and share that model on this stage in Long Island or in New York, TEDx Farmingdale,
Wow.
and yeah, and I told the story from the standpoint of not only these opportunities that we have to create meaning in our world. My talk was about meaning, but also like it was also this opportunity to really be vulnerable, to putting stuff out there.
Mhm.
I was having major seizures and
Mm.
stuff, and you get to roll that all in, and I think, right after it happens, I don't know about you, but I was like, I just fricked that whole thing up, like all this practice, and I messed it up, and again, I didn't know the TEDx world. I had already agreed to TEDx Ocala,
Mhm.
and so I went down there, and yeah, I felt really, really great about it, and since it was in Florida where I grew up, like my parents, my aunts, and my uncles were in
Aw.
there.
Aw.
My dad, it was the last time, yeah, right. It was the last time before he passed, it was the last time he came out and saw some of the stuff that I was doing. And it was just a great, like, bow to some of the things that I've always been super, super excited about
Yeah.
and things that I wasn't excited about in the, in the shadow work. Did you feel like you were doing shadow work?
Totally. It's such a that's why I find it so interesting to unpack how we feel and
Yeah.
what we go through when we do these kind of
Yeah.
big things because it's like it's unexpected. I ended up doing a podcast episode on the things I learned by being on that because
Oh,
you
okay.
don't even expect that you're going to learn those things, things like a different level of discipline and and having a clear deadline. Like for instance, when I started this podcast, I'm the only one making a deadline, right? But when you are going to have that date come and the date is marching forward, like it teaches you such a different level of commitment and focus, and so that's why it intrigues me. So it doesn't surprise me that you say that because it's an
Yeah.
internal work more than anything else sometimes.
But like when I started leaning into it, I was like, hey, I've spoken in public before, and I've given lectures of an hour long, and so this should be pretty easy. And it was not a lecture. It was also not an acting job. It was not a one person show. It
Yeah.
wasn't like going on stage and telling your story like you were at the Moth. It's something that's very different, and I really respect folks that would go on stage and sort of bring the idea forward the way that
Mhm.
folks who want to get into a TEDx would go ahead and do, because it is different from anything that I've ever seen or heard. Also, I've seen some chatter about folks saying, well, a TEDx is kind of, it's easy to get them nowadays. They're a dime a dozen. The quality isn't as good. I vehemently oppose that. It's hard to do TEDx's, you know, and many times a lot of the folks who are saying that haven't given a TEDx
Mm-mm.
talk, you know?
Yeah.
And I wish that everyone could go through the journey of giving a TEDx, because I feel like I'm a better person for it. And yeah, that's why I eventually became a coach,
Hmm.
because now I can go and empathize with the experience of the speaker, and the writing and the memorization and the embodiment, and all of those
Yeah.
things. So yeah.
Yeah, I kind of am remembering back to what I thought
Mhm.
I was getting myself into and what I was actually getting myself into, and the drastic difference between the two. Because it was like, yes, I do really want to share my message on a stage like TEDx stage, because
Right.
I want to be in that space. And even though I felt convicted in my heart that that's what I wanted to do, it's like what you just
Yeah.
said. There are
Yeah.
every single thing that you do on a platform has a different format, a different feel, a different,
Yep.
whether you're going to do a conference or whether you're going to do a seminar, they're
Yep.
all different. So I didn't actually do the research to understand that part of it, until I mean,
Yeah.
okay, I understand how to get my name out there and how to see who's going to pick this up, right? I got that part,
Yeah.
whatever. But then all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, this sharing an
Yeah.
idea thing in a matter of less than 15 minutes is really overwhelming. Did you feel kind of overwhelmed?
I did. I did, especially that first time, because I thought I knew the talk forwards and backwards. I knew that it was going to be 12 minutes long. I knew I was going to be in the auditorium. I knew exactly what the dimensions of the auditorium were. I knocked it out in the dress rehearsals. And then when the actual lights came up and I could see only like the silhouette of
Mm-hmm.
people in the room, and knowing that I could hear my dad coughing here and then my cousin was here, it was very, very different of an experience. And I
Yeah.
did come from like an acting background, and still it was still very different, because you're storytelling and you're pushing forth an idea,
Something that you
and
care
to
about.
try to balance all.
Yeah.
Exactly, right. And to balance all of those things at once, I think I went over 18 minutes and 15 seconds. And I don't know about you, but when I was done, I was like, I'm happy that it's done. I just wish that I would have hit everything that I was rehearsing for. But I don't think, like, the second time I realized that that's not the goal,
Yeah.
is to like give every piece that you rehearsed. It's really, how can you embody it and represent that idea on a stage and make it so clear that that there's a couple who you've never met, and in them driving back from the TEDx talk event, they could say, "Hey, do you remember that like Asian
It's
dude
true.
who went and talked about meaning? Wasn't that crazy?" And then like having those things like create other opportunities for people to have a talk around, or have a discussion around your
Mhm.
talk. I thought it was dope.
No, it
And
really
then to
is.
also have opportunities that came up where people are like, "Oh, hey, you're the meaning like storytelling guy," and I was like, I guess I am. Can you come here to this school and have this? Yes, I will.
Yeah.
And there's just so much cool. There's so many cool things that happen as a result. And a lot of folks will be like, "How do you get through it?" And all I ever really say is, plan early, think about the idea, and get plenty of sleep. Because it's honestly like, I came from a neuroscience background, and if you're not sleeping, you're not memorizing it. And if you're not memorizing it, you're in a whole
Yeah.
crap ton of things to
You're
climb
just
up, right?
just setting yourself up for failure at that point. So, no.
Completely. So yeah, I got to coach someone from TEDx Ocala, Scott. He dropped it. It was
Yeah.
amazing. And all I could tell him was just like, continue to get your full night's
Yeah.
sleep, because that's the only real way that you can continue to move
I'm
forward.
hoping to have Scott I'm
Um,
hoping to have him on as well. I really would love to really unpack his process, because I know that he also has a podcast, correct? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's going to be really fun. And that's
Oh
part of it
yeah.
too, is that I didn't expect to be a part of this little community. You can say a club,
Mhm.
or it's not really though. It's a niche, because it doesn't matter what an individual actually speaks about. You automatically
No.
just care about their idea so much because you understand how much it means to them, and where
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
at. And it's so interesting to unpack how someone chose to share something that they love with that type of audience, and have the boldness,
Completely.
and then what do you think changed about you? like pre and
Yeah.
post? Like, did you feel like there was something that you could pinpoint, or no?
There was a major change in my mindset,
Mm,
from the standpoint of like, I kind of know this idea of positive psychology and meaning and East and Western like philosophies, but I'm gonna confuse everybody. But then I came out of it and I was just like, not only am not only am I a part of the conversation, I have something to say, and I get to leave something, not in a legacy way, but I just get to leave something to say, this is where I'm at with this idea that I love so much, and hoping and praying that someone will go and say, okay, this unlocked something in me. I want to move forward with a new idea, and this idea will be worth spreading. And I think a lot of people will go on and be like, this is my legacy. This talk is my legacy. And that's great. And if I get to abide by TEDx and what they espouse to do, that's getting to get people to talk.
mm-hmm.
Then when it came to like colleges saying like, hey, we want you to keynote something because we're having issues when it comes to like
Yeah.
self-talk and student success and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. So that was my second talk, was on
Yeah.
self-talk. And I just thought that was just so, I thought that was so like, okay, then some of the stuff that they pulled me in to do at a TEDx event, it's
Mm-hmm.
happening. And the reason, like, I can see it happening because I'm getting paid, but even more so, I get to share my idea again in this, like, this hour and a half lecture
Now
now.
you could
Something
put in some of the stuff you had to cut out.
exactly, right? Yes, exactly. What about you? What about you? What was that one thing for you?
I felt as though I think you said it pretty well, but the way I would say it is that I felt like the idea was really deep within my heart, way more than it was
Yeah,
beforehand. Like I had an
yeah,
idea and I really believed in the idea and I talked about it many times. But when I was able to take the time and energy to truly research it and vet it out and say just the words that needed to be said on that stage, it like it made me really proud to know that, like, and the confidence that I
yeah,
can speak on that same subject, um
yeah,
is just, it's just there, you know what I mean? Like, it's even hard to explain.
yeah,
It's like it's
yeah,
just there. It's not even I have to
yeah.
try, I don't have to force it. It's like I did the work to speak confidently on this subject.
Exactly. Yeah. And I totally feel you on that. And I think one of the biggest things when it comes to a TEDx talk is, if you're coming in with a certain level of mastery, you still have to take that mastery and create it as this digestible piece where people can be like, oh, I finally get
Yeah,
this whole hope,
right.
this whole hope thing that Cher's talking
Yeah, and
about.
how
You know what
yeah,
I
and
mean?
to be able to say in a short period of time, I wanna be able to tie that to a way that you communicate. That's what
Yeah.
makes things so interesting about the TEDx, is that
Yeah.
they're not new ideas, but you're presenting it
Yeah.
in your way, and that is what makes
Exactly.
it amazing. And that's why the whole self-talk, obviously we know about self-talk, but the way
Sure.
that you approached how you look at self-talk and why it made a difference to you is what people remember, and that's
Completely.
what's
Well, I hope
yeah,
that.
and
They
that's
would.
why it's so powerful to be able to
Yeah.
express your idea. I think that's part of what we talked about earlier. People are like, "Oh, quote unquote, a dime a dozen. Oh, you can get them, whatever."
Yeah.
Not true,
They're watered down,
because
all that stuff.
I
Yeah.
mean, even though it's so awesome that these TEDx's exist, in all these different places, so we don't have to wait for two large conferences to be able to, hear all these amazing
Right.
ideas, right?
Right.
Still, each and every one of those events are standalone with their own theme and their own vibe, and
Yeah.
they choose exactly the messages that they're trying to put in the world. And it's a beautiful, seamless type of thing, even for the ones that I've been a
Oh,
part of.
yeah.
So it's kind of like, nobody that hasn't really experienced that can really fully understand it until you
Completely.
yeah. So I think that that's part
Yeah.
of why I encourage people, is that if you have something to say, writing a book is amazing. It's definitely, you can speak on that many different stages, but if you're able to put your
Yeah.
message out there to a TEDx, because it will
Com-
definitely level it up. It will level it all up.
com- I absolutely agree with you. And um, uh, I think just the biggest things when it comes to TEDx is that everyone should have the opportunity to go and apply. And even with the application process, you're creating something very special,
Mm-hmm.
and so even some of the folks who I've worked with that are getting a little frustrated with the TEDx selection process, and it can get frustrating. We can go and look at their application and say, look, what you just put in this application, we go and put your story at the beginning, contact me at the end, and then write out your entire TEDx talk. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps. And that
Yeah.
outline that you have for your TEDx talk can completely be used for your book. It can be used for your
Mm-hmm.
online course. And so in many ways, like that is something to be able to stand up, get on the red dot. But then the rest of that, it's up to you. You get to play. And so even though I've seen folks not be able to get in, and they're still getting in at some point, I also get to see them develop this brilliant idea that they see like
Yeah.
no other person on this planet can put this idea together like they can. And that's where
Yeah.
that's also the spark, the activation energy that can get folks out and getting that idea out no matter what. So it's
I
really
think that's a
exciting.
really important message to even just put out
Hmm.
on, with the audience here, is that
Yeah.
an idea is one thing, but
Hmm.
taking the work to making that into
Yeah.
something that you can actually share and tell people
Yeah.
about, even just to tell a story over the dinner table, you know what I mean? And be able to say,
Oh,
this isn't just
yep.
going to be
Absolutely.
in my brain anymore. This is going to be something that I actually share. Like that
Yeah.
process of giving, it's like
Yeah.
it's really, really a huge growth. I think in any human, I
Yeah.
think people should do it for sure.
You know what? I love that you bring that up, Cher, because that's what a TEDx is,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's you standing on a dot, creating a declaration, and then giving,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like you can still do that, like you said, around a dinner table.
Yeah.
You know, you can do that on a road trip. You can do that, hanging out to get onto a plane, and the person next to you just strikes up a conversation. Next thing you know, you're lighting somebody else
The
up,
moment. Yeah, you
and
just don't let
yep,
those moments flow by. And if we leave all that stuff in our brain, then we try to share it. It's like, blah, 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 that came out all wrong. But if we take time to really sort out our ideas and be like, what is it actually that I want to express? Then
yeah.
it makes our whole life better. It really is what we're trying to say.
Completely, and it's just really cool, and I've loved to see how people have designed things from their or for their TEDx talks, and just the way that those ideas go and they develop into other things,
Yeah.
and the next thing you know, it's 3 years later, and the person has the the TEDx talk, and they've got all this other stuff that's been
Yeah.
created. And I guess it starts with that sort of the self determination to be like, yo, this is what I want to stand for. This is what I want to move forward with. No one can stop me. I love what I'm
Mhm.
doing. Next thing you know, it's an application and somebody's like running with it.
Right.
So,
Did you
yeah.
start your podcast before or after you did your talks?
I actually did it. I did it before
Okay.
I got the talks, right. And so, as you know, some of the coolest things about having a podcast where you have a guest come on is that the guest gets to teach you every single day. And so I actually had a Facebook show
Sweet.
5 times a week. A
Wow.
different person would come in, and part of it was I'm a super shy person. No joke. I'm a super shy person. I got to learn something from another person,
Mhm.
but that resulted in me being like, oh my gosh, I'm learning all this new
Yeah.
stuff, right? And then that idea on the napkin
Yeah.
came, and there's actually a video of this doing this. I was speaking in Florida for this, I don't know, like Florida Filipino
Mhm.
Americans leadership conference or something, and there was a camera crew
Oh,
there.
wow.
And I said, and I wanted to also, I was talking about the power of creating
Yeah.
declarations to these leaders in the community, and the camera comes up, and I look into the camera and I show the napkin, and I'm like, y'all, this is about to be a TEDx in the next year.
Ah!
And so I started drawing it out, and within like 11 months, it was like 11, 12 months to the day,
Dude, that
it
is
happened.
crazy because that's that I actually do have a similar story to share with you about that. Is
I got to hear
Yeah,
this.
I was actually looking through one of my old journals, like, because I now and then, I don't like all the time journal, but I am a big proponent of journaling. So I was looking through.
Do you start with Dear Diary?
No,
the entirety.
I start writing, and
Yeah.
but in my journal that I sell on Amazon, I do have something at the end where you should write to yourself, like dear share, and
Mm,
then write what you should
yeah.
be writing to yourself, like the self-talk that you're talking about. So important.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, so I was looking through a list of things that I had said that I wanted to do someday. And I had written it quite a long time ago. And I realized the only thing on that list that I hadn't done was that I had put, I wanted to do a TEDx one day. And so it was like
Oh,
it
so
was
good.
literally the beginning of 2022, right? And so I did, or not
Yeah.
2020, yeah, the end of 2022. And it was the end of 2023 when I did the talk. So it was almost 12 months. I just sat there and was like, this is unacceptable. It's the only thing not on my list. I need to figure out how to do this. And I started putting my mind to it and figuring this sucker
Exactly.
out. And, 12 months later, I'm standing on the stage with Ad Ocala. So, you know,
Yeah. I mean, declarations are
yeah,
huge, whether it be like in front of Filipino people or whether it be in your
right.
diary,
It
you
was, and
know?
it wasn't at that
Um,
moment that I ended up writing it down. Another thing is this year I want to do a TEDx talk, and and it's that simple. Like you said, it doesn't even have to be in front of people, but something happens within our mind when we take it seriously. Like, okay, now we mean business.
completely.
Now we mean business right now.
Completely. And I don't know about you, but when you make that initial, declaration, the it's like taking your knapsack, you hit a wall and you throw it to the other side and you're like, okay, I gotta find a way to get that
That's
knapsack
right.
back. Like that's what
This
a
is
declaration
happening.
is.
Right.
Right, right. And I don't know about you, but for some of those things, I don't know if this is universal law or anything, but like if I can tap into the feeling of what it will be like to have those goosebumps on
Yeah.
stage and to like look into the audience and have that like light burning into your eyes and just taking in the crowd for a
Mm.
second, it's sort of it just makes it so much real, that
You could
feeling.
feel it again
And
just by thinking about it. Mm-hmm.
exactly. And I'm not sure if we talked about this on the last podcast, but like your brain doesn't know the difference between whether you're making up the emotion or whether you're feeling the emotion for
Right.
real. And I don't know what that leads to, like what reticular activating
That's
system
right.
and all those sorts of things
Yeah.
being lit up.
But that's the
But
thing
yeah,
about it is that how often do we not turn that on within us? It's like it's always accessible to us, right?
yeah,
Like that's what
yeah,
you and I have even talked about in other conversations. Like it is always accessible, but we don't access it. And to be able to say, I want to access that part of me and not be scared of it and not be worried about it, just do it. It's it's
yeah,
something I want to do more of. I want to access it more in my journey of looking to publish a book and the other ventures
yeah.
that we do. It's like you want to do it again, you know?
Oh, you completely want to do it again,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this was something that I've been able to see in my clients, but also, in those two talks that I gave. You kind of leave and you're like, yo, if I can do what I just did, what can't I
Right.
do?
You really feel like when I actually had realized, like, oh my gosh, I thought about that and figured it out. Like, I want to be able to share even more, not only with people that I coach, but just with
Right.
people. You can do more than you think you can do. You can,
Yes,
these little
exactly.
dreams and these little thoughts that you have in your mind, they are given to you, they're a gift. The only thing that
Mm.
stops us from moving forward is sometimes our own self-talk or belief,
Oh,
right?
completely.
And then we stop our own
Completely.
self from a door that maybe was
Yeah.
meant to be opened. um it's such a huge truth that we sometimes think, oh, are we being really woo-woo about it? But no, it really is the way our brain is made. Like it's how our actual brain is functions
Yeah.
well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of the woo woo stuff comes from neuroscience and science background. So I love seeing all of it coming together as we're sort of talking about all the
Yeah,
newer things that are coming together right now. I forget whose podcast it is.
you're so funny.
You got me all lit up here, Cher.
It's a conversation anyways. It doesn't matter. We're all good.
Yeah,
But yeah,
completely.
no, I didn't watch the first one, but the second one on mindset, I mean on self-talk.
Yeah.
That one I've watched a couple of times. So I don't know. I
Oh,
feel
okay.
as though like I really believe highly in the fact that what we tell ourselves matters, and the
Agreed.
narrative that we choose to live, because it's like what we choose to tell ourselves. I don't know. You didn't say this on stage, but I'll elaborate on what you said is
Please.
What we choose to believe also becomes our memory later. Like the way we choose to
Yes.
talk to ourselves, it determines how we remember that very event. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and that kind of goes
Yeah.
into some of the things I know you're going to offer my audience, which I'm excited. It's a little teaser. I'm not going to tell them yet. But um
Mm.
but
Some
when we
pro tips
tell
right there.
ourselves, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that was just like the worst ever. I can't even believe this. Then we're going to remember 3 years later that it was the worst ever. Right. But
Right.
if we
Yep.
capture that and say, you know what? I did the very best that I could possibly do in that moment, and I am proud of myself. Then 3 years later, we will look back, and that's how powerful our brain is. We will remember, you know what? I'm proud of myself. So it's like
Yeah.
so critically important, not only for our moment today, but for our future self, that we take our thoughts
Completely.
and talk good to ourselves. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't even know. You got to tell me how you came up with that second idea, but I love it. So
Yeah, well, no napkins on that one. No napkins. Before we go
yeah.
into that, I think some of the work that you and I do is a way of time traveling,
Mm,
right? Because I can be here for 20 years and I have this experience in my mind, and then 20 years goes by and I have this like visceral negative response to it, and then some sort of activity or reflection or working with a coach or a therapist will then go and access the same thing, but the outcome is different.
yeah.
Like, oh, wait, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
I was the one that was feeling that spotlight effect,
Mm.
and it wasn't as bad as a lot of people as I
Isn't
thought.
that
And
interesting?
suddenly those right, and then those next 20 years, now that you get to live it forward, are thought through a lens of maybe something that's more positive, and suddenly the person changes instantaneously.
Right. Have you
You
seen
know,
that right before your eyes with clients where you're like, oh my gosh, they're
I
looking at this differently now?
Completely.
Mm.
Completely. I think that's one of the things that like lights me up so much when it comes to some of the background in like, you know, in education or in positive psychology, any of those things. Even the behavior change that I got to look at when I was in public health.
Hmm.
There's just these really great things. And even when I go back and I when I look at self talk or chatter, um, you, you know, the question that I really had about that going into the TEDx talk was, is chatter or self-talk more nature or nurture? Right? Because
Whoa. Yeah. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
this whole I think it's in Wisconsin, I'm sorry. There's this whole group in Wisconsin that's been looking at chatter as like, yeah, this is something that everybody has. And I saw this book that was out. It's called The Alter Ego Effect. And it sort of talked about, how we can change our chatter and become this greater sense. But the biggest things that I thought of when I heard this was, oh my gosh, I feel like this is a heteronormative man, Caucasian, Christian,
Mm.
upper middle
Hmm.
class, who's telling me to go and do what he wants
You're
me to
like,
do,
does
like
this
to be
relate to
like
me?
him.
Is this,
And I was
yeah.
like, that exactly. And I was just like, oh my god, I just spent like 25 years trying to like get therapy to not be like like other people. But so that TEDx talk was about, what about people who are in the margins, and what does self-talk look like for them? And so I started talking to folks about like, what was their narrative growing up, and how did marginalization and mattering look like for them growing up. I think that there's a danger there with our chatter, that if we try to chase these sort of um, these archetypes that aren't really me, it could result in a lot of issues. And so I just thought
Yeah.
that that might be something to talk about when I was on the stage. And the I guess the personal story in it was, me trying out for a roller derby team. And I think one of the interesting things about roller derby is that you name yourself something different than your real name. And so, in many ways, that process of naming myself Manila Ice,
So funny.
goofy, right? Goofy, outgoing, that still was an extension of Marc. And so, this time around, what I was hoping I could get across in that talk was, maybe the hero, maybe the self talk, the chatter, can be can be alleviated by you thinking about yourself being what does it mean to be Cher at 11? What would Cher do at when the volume is turned up to 11? And so psychological distancing looks a lot different rather than mimicking another person who you know nothing about, you
Exactly.
know. And so that's what I was throwing out there in that talk.
That was why I loved it, is because the personalness, that's not even the right
Mm,
word, but
yeah.
making things personal and real and like actually
Yeah.
meaningful, and the way
Yeah.
that you went about being like, how at the end, like saying how you actually talk to
Mhm.
yourself, and
Yeah.
that last teaching moment of being like, this is something that is more like an intimate declaration of who you are. It's not repeating,
Yes.
it's not repeating something that you've been told or
Yeah.
you've heard, because of whatever you've seen on TV that don't even reply to you or whatever it is, like you talked
Right.
about. And so I think that's what made it really amazing, is because you are standing up
Oh,
there, um, saying, hey, I look like me. I don't look like those other people. Now, what am I going to do? And now, how
yeah.
do I process that? And then to twist it into the fact that you were in roller derby almost was like almost hilarious, but it was in such a great way. So like,
Well, I mean, psychological distancing is a huge thing, you know,
talk
and
to
there's
us
a,
about it.
like I said, yeah, well, you know, when it comes to psychological distancing, like what is the number one thing that we often have, you know, with these psychological studies? Well, we have that Lake Wobegon effect. Like I'm different than other people. We have the spotlight effect. Like everybody can see me sticking out like a sore thumb, you know, and for a person like me who was very high in, maybe still times, very high in anxiety, a person like me who I just wanted to fit in,
Mm,
you know. And I don't even know if I had talked about that in the TEDx talk because,
limited time.
you know, oh yeah,
We only have so much
I
time.
had I only had 18 minutes, right? But to you know, to go to you know, a school where I loved going to school there, but you know, there were these times when I remember we were studying the Aborigines in our social studies class, and I remember this dude named Mark Brown, and he was like, "What tribe is Marc Cordon from?" And I just remember,
Oh,
right?
wow.
And I remember like the class thought it was hilarious, the teacher thought it was hilarious, but like it
You're like,
was
it actually wasn't
humiliating.
funny to me, but okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was
Right.
humiliating, right? But you know, so there's this work that you do when it comes to the chatter, and part of the reason why I think chatter is there is it just wants to protect you. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want to see you humiliated again like you were in the 6th grade, you know. But when it goes and takes over the wheel, that chatter, it's hard to achieve things.
Yeah.
It's hard to be either a roller derby player or a
Right.
PhD. You know, we you know,
When
and
in
so
reality, we are all of those things, and we,
yeah,
I mean, in reality, like the what's that word? Intricacies? Yeah, I think I said it right. But, like, we are all those things. We are the silly and the serious
yeah,
and the,
yeah,
and that's what makes us each individuals to celebrate,
completely,
you know?
completely.
But
Yeah,
that
and I
doesn't
mean,
mean that the chatter is saying that.
not
That's
at
the
all.
thing,
Yeah,
is it matching with that?
completely, completely. And I mean, I've had a conversation with spiritual folks, maybe some folks who love being called woo woo. I like being called woo
I
woo
know.
every now and then, who will go and say this is your inner child, right? Or if you go to a site, it's an inner child. I don't know, inner child healing,
Right.
those sorts of things, right? Whereas you go and take the same thing to a group of psychologists, and they'll be like, oh, that is literally the reptilian part of the brain that's trying to protect you from the things that had messed you up all those years
Mhm.
ago. And regardless of how that falls and the way that you want to look at therapy, it's something that I think a lot of people can go and see,
Yes.
you know. And I don't know about you. Did you have a lot of chatter growing up, Cher?
I feel as though I feel like, I mean, I think anyone would be lying if they said that the chatter isn't constantly rolling in one
Completely.
way or another. It's just that when you become aware and you actually sit back and think about that, it really kind of like, you have to sit back and go, wow, that was there. And how did that affect me? And how do I want it to affect me moving forward? Um,
Oh,
I think that's
completely,
the huge part
completely.
about it, because I came from a really big family with like but there was, until my parents came to California when we lived in
Mhm.
Washington, there was a lot of arguing. My parents ended up divorcing, but I think
Mhm.
about how I felt like a imposter in a sense, like
Yeah.
what we're going to kind of talk more and more about, because the persona that we were putting out in public as a family was not actually what I was witnessing in my home. Like,
Oh, you guys are
yeah,
Filipino.
it was very, yeah, what do you know? Yeah. But so it would be like in the house, there'd be all this totally mad fighting. And, you know, I was confident that my parents were eventually not going to make it. But then in public, we would look like totally different. And I think that
Yeah.
it caused, I didn't realize until later that I had to do a lot of work on that to be able to understand
Okay.
what authenticity really looks like, as you also have. So, yeah.
Completely. And I do think that um, that's where this idea of psychological distancing can be very strong, to be able to say, I'm going to see if I can remove myself from this, and what objectively can I find,
Hmm.
and I think this is one of the cool things about giving a TED talk. I have this course called the Joy Revolution. And in that Joy Revolution, we will go and talk about things like self talk or high emotional places
Hmm.
where, now I can be like, it's 3 steps in my program. Like, number one, can you get neutral or see it objectively? And many times we can't,
Mm.
and that's why I need little help from my friends sometimes. But then at the very end, being able to go and say, now that I can be objective of the situation, if I can, what is the lesson in this?
Yeah. Yeah.
The lesson is, maybe it's not me, that it's Mark Brown that needs the help.
Mhm.
The lesson is, oh, it's not me that's
I didn't
causing
need to
the
hold on to that
the
at all.
divorce.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that
And I think
alone
that's where you
is
can
a
start.
lesson, right? Because to have the
Exactly.
realization of saying, now that I'm reflecting on this, I was holding on to something I didn't need to be holding on to at all. Right. Yeah.
Completely,
Yeah.
Cher. Yeah.
So your education, like break down your education background.
Oh, okay. So both my parents were doctors, right? So there was a certain expectation of the way things would
What
go.
kind of doctor are you going to
And
be? Not if you're going to be a doctor, right? One of those deals.
exactly. Exactly. I'm writing a book right now, and I wrote like multiple pages about how my dad, when he went on rounds, like I'd come with him so I could get the cookies from the nurse's station. But the issues that would come up from that, like I had no idea how long those would be in my brain
Mm.
and in my heart. Because usually when I'd go around with my dad, the most typical things that I heard were, "Oh my God, aren't you
Oh
precious?
gosh.
You're gonna be a physician like your dad, right?" And I was just like, "I just want cookies." Like,
Like,
and so
sure. Yeah, that's what's happening
completely,
here.
yeah, yeah, completely. And so when I actually went to go to college, I'm so lucky because I declared neuroscience and behavioral
Mm.
biology as my major, underneath thinking that I'm going to go and continue that torch that would be passed to me. That was part of having immigrant parents who came to the United States. You don't want to disappoint
No.
them, right? But what something interesting came up. Yeah, no, exactly. Something interesting that came up was, I never really started thinking about my cultural identity
Mm.
and what leadership looked like in college. So I got really involved in co-curricular activities, starting organizations, and welcoming families during
Wow.
orientation. So I remember being like, "Oh, dude, there's a way that I can improve people's lives that I don't have to be a doctor,
Mhm.
right?" And so it was really tough at first, because I was like, there was the neuroscience classes, which I love to death, and then there was also my co-curricular life, which was great. I got to think about, what does a voice look like in the late '90s, early 2000s? What does that look like? And you know,
Mhm.
I still was active after I graduated, but at the same time, I wanted to bring activism to health, which is why I went and got a public health degree, and I got
Mhm.
a master's in public health. And after that, I ran away. I joined a band, and I tried to be like Michael Jackson. I came back to work in Emory under intercultural, multicultural services and programs,
Wow.
and they helped pave the way for a doctorate in education and counseling. I went
Interesting.
ABD. I went totally ABD,
That is
but also at the
so
same time, I
interesting.
think this is what's right. It's insane.
Yeah.
but then like I stand or I sit here in front of this microphone talking to you. I don't know who's listening right now, but like just the way that you can go back and say, okay, like the leadership that I took up is what I'm going to use for my is what I'm going to use for the way that I run my own business. Sort of the hustle attitude I'm going to go and use that I got from my parents. I'm going to go and use for my business. Like the way that I treated my voice and being healthy when I was in a band, I'm going
Oh,
to use for my business. And it's so
kind of like these
awesome when you
building
could, right?
blocks, right? These building blocks that now you can see. Interesting. Yeah.
Completely. Did were you like that, or did you like, no, I know that I'm going to do this. I know that I'm going to do this. I know that I'm going to do this.
No, I
You look
didn't.
like a planner,
I
homie. And
didn't have
really
expectations put on me. That was one thing for sure. Is
got it.
because of the fact that my parents were going through their own struggles right as I was moving into that period of my life, I feel like
Hmm.
they never really had the conversation with me, like even going to college. There was no conversation.
Hmm.
It was kind of like
Wow.
I really didn't know what I was going to do. So I just kind of was like, well, I think I'm just going to go to the local community college because what else am I going to do? And so I started taking classes there, and then I found that I loved my littlest sister went to the preschool there. So I started working at the
Hmm.
preschool and realized I loved kids, and then I took classes and realized I loved child psychology, and then I realized I like psychology in
Oh, I
general.
love it.
So it was like it was a
Yeah.
discovery. It was a very authentic, slow discovery of being like, oh, I think I'm going to be in education. Well, actually, I think I want to get a master's in counseling because that was ultimately the master's that I got. But it was not like yours at all. Where that's like, you had an expectation, but you still found your own journey. And then the most
Right.
important part of that is that
Yeah.
you didn't take a traditional path, but you took your path.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's similar with
I
mine. I had to take a path that there wasn't one that was charted for me, but it was still, moving along a path that I was
yeah.
journeying through.
No, I love that.
Hmm.
I love that. It reminds me of this book called The Pathless
Oh
Path
yeah,
that comes out where they're like, yo, like you can literally go and choose any
I think I need
direction
to
that
look
you
up that
want,
book. Yeah.
one thing that I'm really grateful for, that internal depression and anxiety, I think of as these bricks that were laid down so that
Mm.
when I finally found this thing called positive psychology, it was almost like, oh wow, I don't have to start with
Because it
pathology
makes
like
sense.
with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's this we I was working in a university. We knew how to bootleg courses from Harvard, and I went and I stumbled over the summer when there weren't a lot of students on this course in Harvard called The Psychology of Happiness.
That
And
sounds
I
amazing.
saw, right. um, I got to see every single one of these studies that were linked to empirical data and neuroscience
Hmm.
about how this idea of looking at what's working first is something that is so for me it was so
That's
novel.
huge.
It was so different,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And so I started thinking about, well, okay, here's this thing about this empowering sort of positivity towards life. Here I am, being okay with my university life. But that's sort of where these amazing programs came up, from creating this Joy Revolution program,
Hmm.
or to think about, oh, if I gave a TEDx talk, what would I want to talk
Yeah.
about? I'd want to talk about positive psychology and people of color. And so that's what happened at TEDx Ocala was I got to talk about positive psychology, what's working, keeping your name, those sorts of
Hmm.
things. And then also, what does that mean for people of
But
color?
I can say that it was
Vanilla
relatable
ice.
to everyone. Like that's the thing that's interesting is that we forget is that even though we're sharing it from our deepest place of heart, we can all identify with each other, you know? And
Completely.
I did not at
Completely.
all feel as, typical white girl over here. I didn't ever feel like I
No.
was
Yeah.
disconnected to your message simply because
Yep.
you were being authentically talking about your own journey. Which I think makes it
Completely.
beautiful because at the end of the day, each of us with our own journey that we went through, we have the same experiences just in a different type of way, a different type of.
I 100% agreed with you. And there was something that happened in the writing process and in the rehearsal process where I just stopped thinking about like, oh, I need to talk about this one identity. It was sort of this identity in general. You could see that I was Asian American, Filipino American, and just to speak from that standpoint and speak my truth. Like, I'm so glad that a lot of people picked up. Like, oh yeah, that I didn't see that as like this Filipino thing. Yeah, yeah. So I'm super glad that it landed with you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's
Exactly.
important for
Yeah,
authenticity that you were able to. I mean, we know the words are very carefully chosen, but you did a great job through the whole
yeah,
superhero and the vision of you and your sister, like that whole you kind of gave us a vision of what you were
yeah,
talking about, which I think that's what relates to people. When we share stories, the story easily in our mind, like it's like a song, right? You were in a band, but like
yeah,
it's amazing that you can listen to a song
yeah.
and one person can have this complete narrative memory of this one thing, and somebody else in the same time can hear the same song and have a completely different thing that it stirs up in them. And it's the power of the
It,
message that we make personal for ourselves, right? And that,
I 100%
yeah.
agree.
And that's why it was important, not only for people that are like, oh my gosh, I felt that way too, where I felt
Yeah,
completely out of like who's going to identify with who I am. But then someone like me can
completely.
say, hey, I felt that way for a completely different reason, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's very, very
And I mean,
awesome.
even yeah, and even when it came to the research, I didn't just talk about Filipino or cultural identities. There was this research on people with eating
Mm,
disorders and like how that can
yep.
distort their view on the world. And even though it was this like one line, I just remember being like, oh my
It's
gosh,
huge.
this research, yeah, this research is, I totally, like, I totally relate to it from the standpoint of seeing myself in something that's very distorted,
Yeah.
and even when your friends are like, no, that's not you at all. It's like, well, that's how I see
Hmm.
things.
So
So
how
yeah.
is it, just to share with the audience and
Mhm.
all, like how is it that you teach people how to have a little, just a little more healthy self-talk that can help them actually find who they really are and be okay with that?
Yeah, well, I think in general, the place where I usually start before even going to self talk is to really think through who you
Mm,
are and what truly brings you happiness. And I know a lot of people will be like, "What? Like, this dude's talking about like happiness? Like, that must be nice to have." But there's these two big schools that I came across. One was this dude named Epicurus, and was like, yo, happiness is like the taste of a grape or the smell of your partner or all
mm.
of these things, and it's fleeting and there's dopamine involved, right? And then Aristotle came back and was like, yo, you're wrong, Epicurus. Like, Aristotle said, yo,
Yo,
right?
yo.
But
Yeah.
Aristotle, right? But he came back and said, that's absolutely incorrect. Like, happiness literally is the feeling that you're living a good life,
Mm,
right? So the combination of the two are things that are just so powerful. If you can find something that's not either or, but like, my life is both hedonic, happiness in the now, and eudaimonic, living the good
mm,
life. And so sometimes when a person is trying to lean into something, they'll be saying there's all this chatter in there, right? I feel like I'm being pulled in different directions. But one thing that we can do is start with, okay, what does it mean for you to live a good life and to live here and now in happiness? Usually the chatter doesn't go away, but it can sometimes pull apart, and all the directions that you're being pulled at from the different strings that are pulling at you, you can figure out who the real voice is in there.
oh,
And oftentimes, yeah. And so there's all these things that pull you apart. Maybe that's that one voice that the whole time you weren't paying attention to, because the chatter of what you should do when you go to college is setting in.
hmm.
The chatter of what you needed to
The
become at this certain
expectations, yeah.
age.
Hmm.
Exactly. This chatter of you needing to have 3.5 kids and a white picket fence suddenly gets blown away. And by the way, thank you, Modern Family, for like letting us realize those
Hmm.
things. But oftentimes chatter will come up. I've seen it come up in two different ways. Chatter comes up from the standpoint of there's something there, and it's trying to protect you from being hurt. And so this chatter shows up. Or chatter just comes from the shit that you've heard people say about what you should be
Mm-hmm.
doing, and then trying to live a should life. And that chatter will come in, you know? It was so hard, Cher, to tell my parents that I didn't want to become a doctor like
Really?
them. Oh, it was so hard. And especially the fact that I was coming through town and I was like, oh, yeah, by the way, we're playing at the Ritz this night.
Uh,
And like, and I'm also not going to become a
so
doctor,
yeah,
right?
just a
But that
little
was,
thing, you know. No, it's
mhm.
not a little
Yeah, yeah,
thing.
just a little thing, right? Yeah. And so so chatter does show up there for me, you know. And again, there's this third chatter that shows up where I think that there is an evolutionary benefit of chatter, because like, what is chatter for a lot of people? Stay in the status quo.
Mm,
Stay in the status quo. Do not put yourself to the edges,
mm.
says chatter. You might you might get
You might
separated
smash
from
and
the
fall.
tribe.
Yeah, or, yeah.
Exactly. You might get separated from the tribe and then some dinosaur will eat you, right? That's the reptilian part of the brain again.
Mm,
And so there might be a little bit of a nature to your chatter. There might be a little bit of nurture to your chatter. But like, how can we go and separate that for the time being? Think about eudaimonic Aristotelian happiness and then Epicurean happiness. And for a split second, what does that look like and what is that saying?
yeah.
And so I don't know if there's ever a way to turn your chatter off, because for me, it's like, yo, new levels, new devils. When I go to the next level, I'm going to have chatter again.
Mm.
When I go to the next level of my evolution or how I want to express myself, I have chatter again.
But
I'm going to declare it on.
I do like though the way you said that there's a voice that you can focus on, that you can listen to, you
Yeah,
know, amongst the chatter. That's
completely.
really cool because I'm assuming that as you practice it, that it would become that you can point that voice out, you know, easier the next time you're listening for that beacon of like, where do I actually need to go? Right.
Yeah, completely. And I guess if something that seems to work with my clients when I'm working with them and chatter comes up is, okay, that's the chatter. Where did you get that from?
Ah,
I don't
put it in
know.
its place.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, exactly. I'll ask you again next week, and maybe we can do some morning pages where you just write in the beginning of the day, or there's great things that happen when you kind of turn inward and you just ask yourself, what is
I
this?
know.
You know?
And it's like you said, like sometimes we want to run away from that conversation, but it's like the
Yeah,
conversation we kind of need to have with ourselves if we want to level up, right? So,
completely,
um, I mean, I
completely.
absolutely agree with that. And there is also a time and place where you're like, okay, I've thought about this enough. Let's needs to be set aside, and now we're just moving forward. you know?
Completely, completely. And I think this is where I've seen the work of some folks that do inner child healing, where they're like, okay, where's the chatter coming from? Okay, it's here. So what is that chatter doing? If you're in a car, well, it's driving the
Right.
car.
And that's what
Take the
no.
take the inner chatter
right.
and put it in the passenger
Yeah.
seat. You drive. You tell it that after you tackle those things that adults do, you'll buy it an ice cream. But then there's sort of that hopefully autonomy that a person can have once they are able to see the invisible becoming visible.
hmm
Oh, that chatter is something very different, and I can push it here. And
I think
so
that's important.
there's just so many ways that
Yeah,
we can do it.
because I
Yeah.
really feel as though like the whole thing where we've heard before, your thoughts are not who you are. They're just simply thoughts. And then
Mhm.
if a thought is a thought, then you can examine that thought and decide what to do with that very
Yeah.
thought that you had. And I love that
Yeah.
concept of allowing yourself to do that because as a solution focused therapist,
Mhm.
one thing as far as solution focused is that it's not a work that focuses on digging into the inner child too much. It's more recognizing that it's there, and then what am I going to do about it? What's my
Yeah.
what would I like to focus on based on the fact that it's there? And some go to a
Yeah.
solution focused therapist, you're not going there to unpack long drawn out sessions of what happened when you were a child. But
Completely.
but it doesn't mean that you don't acknowledge it. You know, you
Yeah.
acknowledge, decide what you're going to do with it, and then progress with the person that you know that you were meant to be. And that's where the positive psychology comes into play. Um, and that's why I love solution focused. So, I mean, many times people will say, oh, solution focused, one thing is don't be problem focused. Okay, yeah, but that doesn't mean you don't acknowledge that there's a problem. You can,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean you ignore the problem and say, like walking up
Yeah.
and being like, I have ketchup all over my face and just leaving it there or something. No,
Right.
you have a
Completely.
problem, but you're not problem focused. You're not sitting, like you said, and putting
Yeah.
it in the driver's seat and allowing it to make the decisions for your future, you know, that type
Completely.
of thing.
Yeah. And I think that's the same, sort of the same misunderstanding that a lot of people will say about positive psychology.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's all wrapped up in the same areas.
Right.
It's where it really does start with what is working,
Yeah.
like literally what is working. We are not ignoring. We are not ignoring the stuff that's not working. We just want to start with something. We
Mm,
want to start with something. Let's keep this thing that's working and not throw it out.
exactly.
And and yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things when I think about positive psychology, and sort of its contribution in the now. I mean, it's a return to the humanist movement. It's a return to, like, what makes psychology great? What makes being who I am great? How do I want to move forward when it comes to my self evolution?
Mm-hmm.
And even though we're going to tackle some, like, a lot of those things, we're just going to start with what's
I
working.
know.
You know?
What is working, for goodness sake? We know things are
Yeah.
broken, of course. But
Completely.
that,
Completely.
as far as what's working, you mentioned earlier that you're going to
Mhm.
offer my audience a course, and I was going to say that
Heck
is
yeah.
kind of the thing that I think has been one of the greatest evolutions, is that people can learn whatever they want to learn on their own time
Yeah.
frame when they want to learn it. And so
Yeah.
there's not a barrier there, right? And I'm such a
Yeah.
huge component of people finding the knowledge that they need to be able to do all of this work. So even if they're listening and they're going like, well, I don't have a degree in this type of stuff, and I don't really understand all of those words that you're saying that you studied about. But you know what?
I know. I was trying not to
But I
use
mean, I do it all the
jargon.
time too. It's like, but at the same point, that's why courses like what you create are so amazing, because then you can take it in bite-sized chunks and you can say, let it let's help these things. How can it help me? Right. And then you can internalize
Completely.
it for
Yep.
yourself. So I am interested in hearing
Yeah.
more about it. And so what is this course that, we're going to level
Yeah.
up with?
Completely. Completely. So one of the biggest things that I heard, when learning more and more about positive psychology, was that it was Dr. Tal Ben Shahar who said this. If you are happy 24/7, you're either dead or you're a psychopath. It's like we all have, like, our ups and downs and all
Right.
arounds, right? And so that whole idea of toxic positivity can come in and be very,
It can.
help me out with the word,
No,
deleterious. It can be very
it can
dangerous. There
be.
you
And
go.
actually, yeah, the whole toxic positivity thing is, it makes someone feel forced to stay in a happy state, and that alone makes them depressed. Like it's it's
Completely.
crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it happens.
It's Yeah. It is. Okay, so I had been building courses for a number of years. This Joy Revolution course has been amazing,
Mhm.
and a little hint, or a little sneak peek
Mhm.
to the listener. I did this course right after my dad died,
Wow.
and right, and so, like, I'm literally looking into the camera, being like, this is not going to work if I'm blissed out right now.
Yeah.
It's important for me to do it. And I even, like, walked away, and I was like, I'm not even going to do this. Like, this is me, like, trying to compensate for actual grieving,
Mm.
you know and so this course is literally a course about, what does positivity look like? What does it mean? What does toxic positivity look like? How can we identify when happiness is actually hurting us?
Mm.
And then I throw in, like, my favorite things, like there's a Stanford prison experiment. I brought that in,
Got
like,
to.
I brought in a whole other group of things, but this really was something that was very special. And I'm glad, today, to offer it to, your listeners. It's toxic.joyrevolution.com, toxic.joyrevolution.com.
I'll put it in
And
the show
it's
notes.
inside my, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just, I hope that folks will get something out of it, because if there's a person being like, oh my god, if another person says, like, positivity, again, I'm gonna shit my bricks. This is not it.
Right.
This is not it. This is a really um, neutral way to look at
Yeah.
positivity, and I think it's a great starting place because I don't know about you, I haven't really heard of a course about toxic positivity.
No, I know. I mean, I know,
Yeah.
and it's such a real thing where people put
Mhm.
on this happy face and
Yep.
feel like that's what they should, and then they feel wrong the moment they don't feel
Yeah.
that way. And it can be it can just be
Completely.
so hard mentally to deal with. And also just what we're hearing more and more about of the mental health of men,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
men not knowing how to sort out crazy emotions that they have. You're a voice for that because you're being willing to stand up and be like, yeah, you feel this and this is why and this is how to deal with it or whatever it might be. And being bold about that is huge. I was talking to a man the other day where
Oh,
he was
thank you.
saying, I identify as like a strong, confident father, but in my
Mhm.
heart of hearts, I'm depressed. And
Yep.
that's a lot of men, and they don't know how to express it. And sometimes I think a course on toxic positivity can allow someone to sort out what they need to sort out so they don't feel wrong.
I don't think you need to take my
I
course. That sounds pretty cool.
I mean, I'm just saying, we need to take it.
Yeah.
We need to because we need it in our brain. It's like it's one
Completely.
thing to talk about
Completely.
it on a podcast and hear it in our brain. It's another thing
Yeah.
to digest it. And so I really hope that
Yeah.
everybody, has an opportunity to take advantage of this for sure.
That is awesome. Yeah.
So what are the
And
lessons
there
like?
is,
What is it? What do we can we expect?
yeah. So some of there's one that's very close to what you're talking about, like where what does it mean to sort of take the mask off?
Okay.
Like what does it feel like? Um, what does it look like to live in at the time that this was recorded? Some of the things that you were seeing in social media were positive vibes only,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, I was receiving a lot of uh, I was getting receiving a lot of calls and texts from my friends saying, "Look at the bright side. Look at the bright side. I get
Can't
it, but
always.
no."
Right. You can't. It's
Yes.
not actually realistic all the time. And like you said,
Yeah.
that's why you named it, toxic. And the joy revolution part is important because that's the name of your podcast. So
It is. It
if we
is.
did
It
not
is.
mention it, look up Joy Revolution
Yeah.
podcast. You might
But
see
there's,
an
I mean,
episode with me there. I don't know. It's just a possibility.
oh, so good too. So good, so good,
We
so
had more
good.
great
Especially if
conversations.
you like hope
Right.
theory.
We got into it, man. We got into it. I'm glad that you chose to put this out there because it falls in line with your journey, but also in what you want to give to other people that are walking in that space.
Completely,
Yeah.
completely. And some of the stuff that I do, just in general, is to create. How can we create social change based on joy? But before we have that conversation, we have to have a conversation of what happiness and joy and contentment really look like. Because if you go in and it's toxic, you have toxic positivity and try to create a revolution around that,
Mm-mm.
there's going to be some really wonky stuff that
Yeah.
happens.
Well, joy is
You know,
different. That's why I'm glad you chose to use that
yeah,
word because it's really
mhm.
more of it gives you really an internal feeling, like the joy of it
Completely.
all. Yeah.
Yeah, completely.
So, well, thank you. So, I think we're all just kind of you gravitate towards people that are like-minded, right? So, I'm
Yeah.
hoping we do a lot more of that. Maybe we'll get together on a podcast with like 6 or 7 of us and just like
Oh my
blow
God, so much,
blow it out of the water or
so
something.
much.
But either way, I'll see you in Florida or I will see you whenever because we're just going to have to keep in touch and keep in each other's
Oh,
lives for sure, right?
I guess so, huh? Yeah.
But thank you for coming on and just sharing from your
Oh my
heart.
gosh, thank you for
It
having
means
me.
the world to
Yeah.
me. And anything else? What do you want to leave to the audience? What's one last thing that you want to share? If anyone's here and they need to have more joy in their life, what would you tell them?
Oh my gosh. Well, I guess I'll just talk about like the way that I always talk, for your sake, for my sake, for goodness sake, to start your revolution. Start in love and light and shadows and enjoy. Everyone's got one.
Mm-hmm. And take the leap forward, right?
That's right.
Well, thank you.
Flourish forward.
Yeah, flourish forward. I
Yeah.
like that. Right. Well, thanks, Mark.